In this video, I'm going to teach you Python by working through a project. Now, this project I'm going to write completely from scratch, which means I don't have it up on my other screen. I've not written this before. It's a completely new project to me. Now, the point of this is not only am I going to teach you basic Python syntax and some different language features, I'm also going to explain to you how you structure a program, how you decide where you're going to start, what different components you need to build out, and kind of how you go about the different tasks. This is going to be perfect for people that have a little bit of experience with Python. They've written some code before, but they're not yet comfortable and confident to go and write their own project, or they don't know where to start when they're kind of diving into a task on their own. Hopefully, this is going to make you a lot more confident. You're going to learn a bunch about Python, and you're going to have a good project that you can show after this video. So I encourage you to follow along, type this project out with me. And with that said, let's dive in after a quick word from our sponsor. Before we get started, I need to thank OctoML for sponsoring this video. As we know, building and training the perfect deep learning model for your application is just the first step. After that, it's time to push it to production. Now, rather than learning completely new tools for model acceleration and containerization, you need a bridge that gets you from model building and training to deployment as fast as possible. Now, that's where OctoML CLI comes in. Using OctoML is very similar to working with Docker and Kubernetes. You start with a trained model and ingest it into OctoML. Next, OctoML packages the model into a Docker container with NVIDIA's Triton Inference Server, which you can deploy to your local Docker desktop, any cloud Kubernetes service like Amazon EKS, Azure AKS, or even managed ML services like Amazon SageMaker. When you're ready, you can then use OctoML to accelerate your model peak performance on your CPU or GPU hardware target. Get started today by clicking the link in the description and downloading the OctoML CLI for free. Make sure to be one of the first 20 Tech with Tim subscribers to try OctoML to receive a special welcome gift. So you're probably wondering now, what kind of project are we going to work on? Now, I wanted to pick something that was unique and that I haven't done before, so we're actually going to build a text-based slot machine. Now, the way this will work is the user will deposit a certain amount of money. We're then going to allow them to bet on either 1, 2, or 3 lines of the slot machine, just to keep it pretty simple. I know in real slot machines, they have a lot more lines than that. And then we are going to determine if they won. So if they got any lines, we're going to multiply their bet by the value of the line, add that to their balance, and then allow them to keep playing until they want to cash out or until they run out of money. So this is actually a fairly complex project because we need to do a lot of things. We need to collect the user's deposit. We need to add that to their balance. We need to allow them to bet on a line or on multiple lines. We then need to see if they actually got any of those lines. We then need to spin the slot machine, or we would have done that before, right? We need to generate the different items that are going to be in the slot machine on the different reels. And then we need to add whatever they won back to their balance. So there's quite a bit of stuff going on here, and this should be a challenging enough project to make it interesting for you guys. So before we even get into this, I just want to mention, I obviously am not supporting gambling here. This is just kind of a cool thing that we can do. We're not using any real money, and I think it's a good project. So just keep that in mind. Do not gamble. I'm not supporting that by making this video. And before I write any code, what I like to do here is just think of the different things that we need to do in this project and kind of pick a good starting point. The place where I like to start usually is collecting some user input. And for this project, we need to get the deposit that the user is entering, as well as their bet, right? Those are kind of the two things we need before we can start actually using the slot machine and generating, whatever the slot machine spun. So to do this, I'm going to make a function here called deposit. Now, I'm just inside of Visual Studio Code. You can work in any editor you want, and I have this main.py function open. I assume you guys can open your own Python file and kind of work in your preferred environment. So this function here is going to be responsible for collecting user input that gets the deposit from the user. Now, a function, if you're unfamiliar, is just something that we can call that's going to execute a certain block of code and then can potentially return us a value. And you'll see how this works in a second. So what I'm going to do here is set up a while loop. And the reason I need a while loop is because I'm going to continually ask the user to enter a deposit amount until they give me a valid amount. So if they don't give me a valid amount, then they need to keep typing in until eventually we get one. So to do this, I'm going to say my amount is equal to input. And then inside of input, I'm going to pass a prompt, which is some text that will happen before we allow the user to start typing. So for the prompt, I can say, what would you like to deposit, ? And then I can put something like a $sign and then allow them to start typing after the $sign. Okay, now what I need to do is check if this amount is actually a number. Because they could type in anything here, right? They could type in hello world, They could type in nothing and just hit enter. They can do whatever they want. So I need to make sure that the amount actually is a number before I get out of this while loop. So I'm going to say if the amount dot is and then digit like this, then we can do something inside of here. Now, is digit is just going to tell us if this is a valid whole number. So if it's something like 1,000, 10, whatever, if they type in a negative number, it actually won't be true. So if they do something like -9, then it's not going to be true, and we call is digit. Anyways, this is a method you can use on strings to determine if this is a valid number. So if this is a digit, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this into an int. So I'm going to say amount is equal to int amount. And that's because by default, this comes as a string, and we want to have a numeric value for our balance or for our deposit, so we need to convert this to an int. However, I can't do this before I make this check, because if I do that, then this could potentially fail, because if they try to type in something like hello world, then this here is invalid. I can't convert hello world into an integer, so that's why I'm first checking if they did actually enter a valid number. If they did, I then convert it to a number. Now what I need to do is check if this number is greater than 0. So I'm going to say if the amount is greater than, not equal to, but is greater than 0, then I'm going to break out of this while loop. If it's not greater than 0, then I'm going to put an else statement here, and I'm going to say print amount must be greater than 0 dot. Okay, there we go. Now I'm just going to add one more else statement down here, and I'm going to say print please, if we could type this correctly, enter a number. Okay, then finally here, we are going to return our amount. All right, so let me go through what we just did here. So we wrote a function, deposit. This is a while loop, so we're going to continue to do this until eventually we break out. And this break keyword just ends the while loop, and then will bring us down to this line. I ask, what is the amount you want to deposit? They enter something. If this is a digit, then I'm going to convert this to an integer, and I'm going to check if this is greater than 0. If it is, it's a valid amount. We can work with this, we'll break out, and then we'll return that amount, and we can use that later on. Okay, otherwise, I'm going to print this amount must be greater than 0, because if it's not greater than 0, well, we need to tell them that and then get them to try again. All right, so that handled this first if statement. Now, if the amount is not a digit, then what we're going to do is print, please enter a number, and we're going to continue this until we get a number and until we break. All right, so that's that function. Now, to call the function, if we spell deposit correctly here, I don't even know how I messed that up so badly. Okay, deposit. To call the function, we simply write the name of the function and we put our 2 parentheses. And now as soon as I run my code, this function will run and we'll be able to actually enter a number. So let's do this. You can see in my terminal that it's asking me, what would you like to deposit? Let's go with something like $10 and all is good. Now, if I run this again and I enter something like hello world, it tells me, please enter a number. Okay, let's enter 0. All right, amount must be greater than 0. Enter 1. I'm good to go. So there we go. We've written our first deposit function and I've tested it. It's working good. We're all good to go. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my amount is equal to my deposit. And actually, we're going to call this balance. And this is kind of the start of our program here. And in fact, I'm going to put our program in this function main so that if we end our program, we can just call this function again, and then it will rerun the program, right? So I can say, do you want to play again? And then we can rerun the main function and we'll be good to go. So we've done that. Now I need to call the main function so that we start running main, and then it's going to do everything inside of here. Okay, so now inside of main, the next thing that I want to do is I want to collect the bet from the user. So there's actually a few ways I can do this, but I need to determine how much they want to bet and then how many lines they want to bet on. And then I would multiply their bet amount by the number of lines. So it probably makes sense to ask them the number of lines first and then ask them how much they want to bet on each line. So it's not confusing if I say, how much do you want to bet? They put $10 and then they say 3 lines and it ends up being $30. See what I mean? So let's say define, and we'll say get number of lines like this. And inside of here, we're going to ask them to pick a number between 1 and 3 because that'll be the number of lines that we have. And to keep this program nice and dynamic, I'm going to add what's known as a global constant at the top of my program. And I'm going to say max underscore lines is equal to 3. Now I'm doing this in all capitals because this is a constant value, something that's not going to change. And this is a convention in Python. You do it in all capitals, and I'm making it equal to 3. Okay, so now anywhere in my program where I'm referencing the number of maximum lines in my slot machine, rather than writing 3, I'll just write this. And then later on, I can easily change this to be 5, and the whole program will update based on that, right? So let's make this 3 for now. Okay, so get number of lines. Obviously, the minimum lines will be 1. We don't need to write that in. Okay, so we need to ask them to enter this. So we can actually just copy everything we have in the deposit function and just change a few values here. So we're going to say while true, rather than amount, we're going to say lines, and we'll say enter the number of lines to bet on. Okay, and then I want to put inside of here kind of the options, so like 1 to 3. So I'm going to write 1 dash, and then I'm actually going to do a concatenation here, plus, and then I'm going to convert my number of lines, or my max number of lines, to a string, and then I'm going to say plus, and then I'm going to put a ending bracket here, question mark, and then a space. Okay, I know it seems a little bit confusing, but what I've just done here is I have now added max lines inside of this string. There's a few other ways to do this, but this is the most basic, so that's how I'm doing it. And I need to convert this to a string because if I add two strings together, they get squished together. But if this was a number and I tried to add it to the string, then this would cause an exception in my program. So enter the number of lines to bet on, 1 dash, and then I'm going to put in whatever the string version is of the maximum number of lines, end my bracket, put a question mark, and then I'm putting a space so that when they start typing, they're not like connected to the question mark. They're off by one space and it looks easier for them to read, right? Okay, so now same thing. I need to make sure that they actually did enter a number. So I'm going to say if lines.isDigit, then I'm going to say that my lines is equal to int lines like this. And I'm going to check now if the lines is within the bound that I had. So within 1 and 3. So the way to do this is I'm going to say if, and I'm actually going to say 0. Actually, we'll say 1 less than or equal to lines, less than or equal to, and then this will be the max lines. All right, so this is something you can do in Python you may not have seen before. If I want to check if a value is in between two values, I can write it like this. So what I'm saying here is if my lines is greater than or equal to 1 and is less than or equal to the maximum lines, then I'm okay. I can break. Otherwise, I need to tell them to enter a valid number of lines. So I'm going to say enter a valid number of lines. Okay, otherwise, same thing. We'll say enter a number, and then rather than returning the amount, we'll return the lines. Okay, perfect. So now we have a function that gets the deposit amount and the number of lines. So now in our main function, we'll say lines is equal to get number of lines like that. And now what we can do is print out the balance and the lines just so we can see what this is when we run the program. Okay, so now let's go here. Let's run. And how much would you like to deposit? Let's go with $100. Okay, enter the number of lines. Let's try 4. Okay, doesn't work. Let's try 0. Doesn't work. Let's try HE. Doesn't work. Let's try 2. Valid. And notice I now have a balance of 100 and the number of lines is 2. The next thing I need to get from my user input is the amount that I want to bet on each line. So let's do this. And we'll have a maximum bet as well. So we'll say max bet is equal to, let's go with something like $100. And let's say the minimum bet is equal to $1. And again, we're putting these as constants so that we can use them kind of anywhere in our program. So now let's just write this function from scratch. Let's say define get bet. So we can add our colon and continue, and for get bet, we'll just ask them how much they want to bet. And honestly, actually, now that I think of it, let's just copy the same thing from deposit. I don't like repeating all of this code, but they are slightly different, so it's fine to do something like this. So for the amount, we can actually use the same value, and rather than what would you like to deposit, we'll say what would you like to bet, question mark. Again, we're going to check if the amount is a digit. We're going to convert this now to an integer, and now we need to check if the amount is between the minimum and the maximum bet. So I'm going to say the min bet less than or equal to the amount, less than or equal to the max bet. Okay, and then break. And here I'm going to say the amount not must be greater than 0. Amount must be between. And now I'm going to show you a second way that we can actually kind of put variables in our string. So I'm going to use an F string here, only available in Python 3.6 and above. I'm going to say amount must be between. I'm going to put my, squiggly brackets like this. And I'm going to say min bet and then max bet. So this is actually a very easy way to embed values inside of your strings. You put F before the string, and then you put your curly braces like this. And inside of the curly braces, you can write any variable, and it will automatically be converted to a string for you if it can be converted. So in this case, I don't need to convert min bet to a string or max bet. It's automatically going to get converted by Python. And I've just put my $signs here to make it look a little bit better when I say, between the min and the maximum bet. Okay, otherwise, please enter a number. That's fine. And then return amount. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to say bet is equal to, and then this is going to be the get underscore bet. All right. Now, we should actually make this a bit more clear. What would you like to bet on each line. Okay, so now that we've done this and we've gotten the deposit, gotten the number of lines, and gotten the bet, we'll probably want to print out here in our main function kind of what they've said so far, right? So we'll say you are betting, $5 on 3 lines. Your total bet is $15, something like that, right? So we're going to say print, you are betting, and let's do an F string here as well. And then let's do a $sign, and we're going to say whatever the bet is. So we're going to say you are betting whatever the bet amount is on, and then this is going to be lines like this. And then we'll write lines. And we'll say total bet is equal to, and then we'll put a $sign, and we're going to put inside of here a variable. I'm going to say total bet is equal to bet multiplied by the lines, okay? And we'll say this is the total bet. All right, so let's run this now, and let's see what we get. We no longer need to print out the balance in the lines, by the way. All right, so let's run this. How much would you like to deposit? Let's say $100. Enter the number of lines to bet on. Let's go with 2. Would you like to bet? How much would you like to bet on each line, or what would you like to bet on each line? Let's go with $10. And now it says our total bet is $20. Great. So this is okay, but I just realized that we actually need to check if the amount that they're betting is within their balance, because they can't bet more than whatever their current balance is. So we need to check that, and we could check this in a few different places. But since I've called this get bet, I'm not going to put it inside of here. I'm just going to do the check here, and then I'm going to recall get bet if they entered an invalid bet. So I'm actually going to put now this inside of a while loop, and I'm going to say while true. I'm going to say bet is equal to get bet, and I'm going to then say total bet like this inside of here. So we put total bet. Okay, now I'm going to say if my total bet is greater than my balance, then we'll say print you do not have enough to bet that amount, and then we'll say what their current balance is. Your current balance is, and then we'll put $sign. We're going to put our F string here, and this is going to be their balance. All right, and then otherwise, we will simply break out. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I also could just put a condition here for the while loop, but I think this is okay for right now. All right, so let's try this now. Let's run our code. How much would you like to deposit? Okay, $100. Let's bet on 3 lines. Let's try to bet $40. And says you do not have enough to bet that amount. Your current balance is $100. Okay, how much would you like to bet on each line? Let's go with $20. You're betting $20 on 3 lines. The bet is equal to $60. Okay, so we have now successfully got the number of lines, the betting amount, the deposit amount. Now what we need to do is we need to actually run the slot machine. Now this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to start importing some modules. So the first module I'm going to import is the random module, because we need to generate the slot machine values kind of randomly, right? So how are we going to do this? Well, the first thing we need to figure out is how many items we want to have in each reel and how long we want the lines to be. Now, slot machines can get a bit complicated in terms of how the lines work. I'm going to keep this really simple, and we're going to imagine that we have a 3x3 slot machine and that you only get a line if you get 3 in a row, okay? If you get 3 in a row, then you win. This might not be the most balanced slot machine. It might not be one you want to play on, but for this project, it's fine. So again, I'm going to set some values here that specify the number of rows and columns we're going to have in our slot machine. So I'm going to say rows is equal to 3 and calls is equal to 3. And if we wanted to make this a little bit better, we could say, I guess, actually, you know what? Row and call is fine for right now. I don't know exactly what they would call, I guess it'd be like reel count and number of reels or something like that. For now, though, this is fine. All right. Now what we need to specify is how many symbols are in each of our reels. Now, it should be the same, at least from what I know. It should be the same number of symbols in every single reel. We're not doing anything really complicated. When I say reel, I'm talking about kind of one column, right? So how many symbols are in that column? Because we're going to have to randomly select out of those symbols, and then we need values for our different symbols. So we need to pick kind of, first of all, how many symbols do we want to have in total, and what do we want those symbols to be? Now, to keep this easy, we can do something just like, A, B, C, D. Like those are probably fine as the symbols. Yeah, we can do something like that. So let's say symbol underscore count is equal to, and let's make a dictionary here. Now for our dictionary, I'm going to have the symbol be a string, and I'm going to have the count of this symbol in each reel. So I guess what we can have is characters that are like at the beginning of the alphabet, like A, be the most valuable. So maybe we only have, I don't know, something like 2 A's in every single reel. And then for B's, we could have something like 4 of those. For C's, we could have 6. And for D's, we could have 8. Now, again, I don't think this is going to be a very balanced slot machine. I'm not going for the best odds here. I'm just trying to kind of make something work. So let's see if this actually works for us. If every single reel we have 2 A's, 4 B's, 6 C's, and 8 D's to choose from. Now, the thing that I think is going to happen here is we're going to get a lot of situations where it's just D's that are being in the reels, but let's see if this works at all in terms of randomly selecting. Okay, so that's what we've done here. Now what we need is something that's essentially going to generate what the outcome of the slot machine was using these values here. So to do this, I'm going to say define, and we'll say get underscore slot machine underscore spin, okay? And inside of here, what we're going to take is we're going to take the rows, calls, and symbols. And this will be the symbols that we pass. So these are 3 parameters that we're going to pass to this function, and then inside of here, we can use these parameters. So inside of this function, again, what we need to do is generate what symbols are going to be in each column based on the frequency of symbols that we have here. So we essentially need to randomly pick the number of rows inside of each column. So if we have 3 rows, we need to pick 3 symbols that go inside of each of the columns that we have. And for each column, we're doing kind of a new random pick, right? A new random generation of the symbols. Now, this can be a bit complicated. Now, the easiest way to randomly select values here for each of our columns is going to be to create a list that contains all of the different values we possibly could select from, and then to randomly choose 3 of those values. And when we choose a value, we'll remove it from the list, and then we'll choose again. Now, what I'm going to do here is not going to be the most efficient algorithm, but since we're dealing with small values, this is fine. So let's see how we work with this. Okay, so what we're going to define here is all underscore symbols. Okay, now this is going to be a list. And what we're going to do is write a for loop that's going to add however many symbols we have here into the all symbols list. So I'm going to say for, and since we're iterating through a dictionary, I can do the following. I can say for symbol, comma, symbol underscore count, and then this is going to be in symbols dot items. Now, when you use dot items, what this does is give you both the key and the value associated with a dictionary. So I can get the key here and the value, and I can just use both of them rather than looping through the dictionary, only getting the keys and having to manually reference the values. Okay, so now that I have the symbol and the symbol count, I want to add this many symbols to the symbols list. Now, there's a few different ways to go about doing this. I think the easiest way to do this is just going to be to run another for loop so that I don't confuse anyone. So we're going to say for, and then this is going to be, let's do this, I in range, and then symbol underscore count. And actually, we don't even need I. We're going to put underscore. Now, this is an anonymous variable in Python. So whenever you need to say loop through something, but you don't actually care about the count or the iteration value, then you just put an underscore, and then you don't have an unused variable anymore. So I'm going to say for underscore in range symbol count. I'm going to say all underscore symbols dot, and then this is going to be append, and I'm going to append whatever the symbol is. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to loop through this dictionary. Let's imagine I'm on the first key value pair. My symbol is going to be A, and my symbol count is going to be 2. All right, so then I have another for loop inside of here where I'm looping through the symbol count. So the symbol count is 2, and what I'm doing is doing this 2 times. So I'm going to add this symbol twice into my all symbols list. All right, now that we have the all symbols list, we need to select what values are going to go in every single column. So how do we do this? Well, let's make a for loop that is going to do this for every column. So I'm going to say my columns is equal to a list. And inside of here, I'm going to place a bunch of lists, which are going to contain all of the values inside of my columns. Now, this may seem a little weird to any of you that have used a nested list before, because typically when you write a nested list, you kind of have all of the interior lists here that are representing your rows. So if I had like 0, 0, then this would be the values that are in row 0, right? Or in the first row. And then this would be the second row, and etc. However, Here, we're doing it the other way around, where each of these nested lists is going to represent the values in our column. So keep that in mind. I'll explain how this works in case any of you are a bit confused later on, but I just want you to know that we're storing the columns, not the rows inside of here. Okay, so we have all of the symbols, and now for each of the columns that we have, we need to generate, the values inside of the columns. And how many values do we need to generate? Well, however many rows we have, that's how many values we need. So we're going to say for, and this is going to be call in range, and then calls like that. And then we need to say for, and this will be row in range rows. Okay, so for every column, we need to generate a certain number of symbols. So inside of here, I'm going to say that my column is equal to an empty list. This is actually not going to have our columns inside of it. I'm just was putting that there for an example. And now I need to select a certain number of values, from our all symbols list. So let's see how we do this. So we're going to say value is equal to random dot choice, and I'm going to choose from all symbols. Now I can use random because I imported random here. Now what we're actually going to do though is we're not going to use the all symbols list. We're going to use a copy of this, and you'll see why. But what we need to do is once we pick a value, we need to remove it from this list so that we can't choose that value again, right? So if there's only 2 A's, we shouldn't be able to select 3 A's. We should only be able to select at most 2. So if we select 1 A, we need to remove it so then the next selection doesn't have that as a chance. So that means we need to make a copy of this all symbols list, because if I start removing from this all symbols list, then when I try to do the next column, it's going to have values removed. So that's what we need to do. We need to make a copy. So I'm going to say current underscore symbols is equal to all underscore symbols. And the way you copy a list is you do this. You put a colon here. This operator here is referred to as the slice operator, because if I just did this and made it equal to all symbols, what happens is current symbols stores the same object as all symbols. Now that means anything I do to all symbols affects current symbols, and anything I do to current symbols affects all symbols. So this is not what we want. We don't want what's referred to as a reference. We want a copy. So the way you do the copy is you put a colon here. Make sure you add this, otherwise it's not going to work. Okay, continuing here. Now what we're going to do is select from our current symbols, and then we're going to remove whatever this value is from our current symbols list. So we're going to say current underscore symbols dot remove, and then value. Now, when you do dot remove, it's just going to find the first instance of this value in the list and get rid of it. Okay. Now that we've done that, we want to add this value to our column. So we're going to say column dot push, and sorry, not push. I'm not in JavaScript right now. I'm in Python dot append the value. All right. And I just realized here, we don't actually need the column and we don't need the row. So we can just put underscores there. Now what we're going to do after this is we're going to say columns.append, and we are going to append our current column. Now let me run through this because I understand it's a little bit confusing. We start by defining our columns list. Then we are going to generate a column for every single column that we have. So if we have 3 columns, we need to do everything inside of here 3 times. That's why we have this first for loop. Then inside of here, what all of this code is doing is it's picking random values for each, row in our column, right? For each value that we're going to have. So we say column is equal to an empty list. We say our current symbols, which are the ones we can currently select from, is equal to a copy of all symbols. Then we loop through the number of values that we need to generate, which is equal to the number of rows that we have in our slot machine. Then we say the first value we're going to get here, or a value we're picking, is random not choice current symbols. This picks a random value from this list. Okay. We then say current symbols dot remove the value so we don't pick it again, and then we add the value to our column. Okay, once all of that's done, so this for loop is finished, we now should have however many rows there are symbols inside of our column. We now add our column to our columns list. Then finally, we can go here and we can return our columns. Okay, and remember that when we're looking at this list here, every interior list gives us the value of the items inside of our column. I know, a little bit confusing. This was quite a bit of logic, especially if you're a beginner programmer, but I told you I wanted to make this challenging enough to be interesting for you and show you some new stuff. So don't worry if this doesn't make complete, entire sense. Maybe read through this a few times, pause the video, go back and listen to the explanation again. But this is, how we generate the items that are going to be in our slot machine. Now that we have this, we want a way to print this out. We want to look at this because I can't even really test this yet until I can print out what's inside of all of my columns. And I want to print this in like a nice way. So I'm going to make a function here and say define print underscore slot machine. And what we're going to take here is our columns. Now, when we have our columns, it's not really in a format that's easy for us to print because we have all of our columns kind of laid out as rows almost, right? Like we have maybe, actually this isn't going to be good, but we would have like A, B, C in one. Maybe we have like A. And again, these are our columns, not our rows. So what I need to do is kind of flip these around. So rather than having like A, B, C, A, it would go A, B, C, right? In the first column. And then this would say A, and then A like that. I know that I kind of butchered this example the way that I wrote it out. We need to change it from being this way to be this way, right? That's how we need to print it out. So how are we going to do that? Well, this operation is actually referred to as transposing because we have what's known as a matrix. We don't need to get into all the fancy words, but understand this is known as transposing. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to write a for loop, and we're going to say for, and then this is going to be row in range. And then we need to determine the number of rows that we have based on our columns. Now, the number of rows that we have is the number of elements in each of our columns, right? Because that's the number of vertical spaces we have. So we need to look at a column and get the length of that. So we're going to say the length of columns 0. Now, this assumes that we have at least one column. And we should always have one column, so it's fine to put this here. But understand that if we did pass something that had no columns, this would crash because there'd be no column at index 0 to access. So I'm saying for row in range, the length of columns 0. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all of my columns and only print the first value in it or whatever the index of my current row is. Again, I'll explain this in a second. I know this is a bit confusing. So I'm going to say for, and this is going to be column in, and then columns like that. And when I do this, now I'm looping through all of the items inside of columns. So it's giving me every individual column. So now that I have a column, I'm just going to print the value that's at the first row of that column. So I'm going to say print, and then I'm going to print column at row. And I'm just going to put a comma here and put a pipe operator. And the reason I'm going to put a pipe operator is so that we have some separation between the different items, right? Now, I just want to make sure, though, that I only put this pipe operator here if we're not printing the last column. Because if we're printing the last column, then we don't want to have the pipe like off, right? We only want to have 2 pipes in the middle, not one at the very end. So the way I need to check this, I need to say for I comma column in enumerate columns. Now, when you enumerate, what this does is give you the index, so 0, 1, 2, 3, as you loop through, as well as the item. So now that I have I, what I can actually do here is I can say, there's a few ways to do this. Let's actually go back to this. We'll say if I does not equal, and then this is going to be the len of columns minus 1. We'll do this. Otherwise, we'll print the same thing. We just won't print the pipe. Now, there's a bunch of different ways we could have done this, but this is just the way that I think is going to be easiest. So that's how we'll do it. So the reason I'm checking if I is not equal to the len of columns minus 1 is because the len of columns minus 1 is the maximum index we have to access an element in the columns list, right? If we have a columns list with 3 items, the length is 3. The maximum index is 2. So if I is not equal to the maximum index, print the pipe. Otherwise, don't print the pipe. That's how it's going to work. Okay, so now we have print slot machine and get slot machine spin. That's all. This is all we need for printing the slot machine. So we loop through every single row that we have. For every single row, we loop through every column. And for every column, we only print the current row that we're on. So we're going to print, row 0. So all of the elements in row 0 first, then row 1, then row 2. And this essentially transposes or flips our columns from being this way to be vertical this way. All right, so let's try this now. And then we'll kind of finish the program because we're actually getting quite close now. All right, so once we determine what they're betting, down here, what we need to do is generate the slot machine. So we're going to say slot, we'll say just slots is equal to, and then this is, what do we call this function? We called it get slot machine spin. Okay, so get underscore slot machine spin, and then it auto-filled this for me, but we're passing the rows, columns, and symbols. So rows is all capitals, actually. calls is like this. And the symbols, I believe we called this the symbols count, or we called it symbol count. So let's go here and make that symbol count. Okay, so now we should have all of the columns in our slot spin, right? That's what that did for us. Now what we need to do is we need to print this. So we're going to say print slot machine, and we're going to pass to this our slots. And really, this is the columns, but I'm just calling them slots because each one is like what's in the slot, right? Okay, let's give this a shot, guys. There probably will be an error because that's usually what happens when you write this much code from scratch, but let's see if this works. Okay, so we are depositing. Let's deposit $100. Enter the number of lines to bet on. Let's bet on 2. And then how much we like to bet on each line? Let's do $10. Okay. Now already we got a bit of an error here because I forgot to do something, which I'll add in a second. But if I scroll here, you can see that what's happening is we're printing everything correctly. We're just not printing it on the same line, which is what we need to do. So ideally we want D, A, and D on the same line, C, B, and C on the same line, and B, C, and A on the same line. So the way that we fix that, my apologies here, guys, is we go back to print slot machine, and here we add this thing called end equals, and we just make this a, what do you call it, an empty string. And in fact, let's actually do this. End is equal to a pipe with spaces. All right, so what end does is it tells the print statement what to end the line with. Now, by default, end is equal to what's known as the new line character or the return character or whatever you want to call this. Carriage return, there's different names for it. I call it the new line character. Now, \n, if you ever print this out, it's what tells the console to go to the next line. So we don't want to print that because if we print that at the end, then that means that we move to the next line after every single row. We only want to do this, after every single column. We only want to do this after every single row. So I'm going to change this to be a pipe. So now we'll just print this pipe at the end of our print statement. So after we print this, here, we're just not going to print anything. And now we need one more check to see if we should go to the next line or not, because every row we want to go down to the next line. So I'm actually going to say here, print, and we can just do an empty print statement. Now, by doing an empty print statement, it just brings us down to the next line because it prints a new line character by default at the end of the empty print statement. Seems a bit weird. That's kind of how this works. We're going to print the first row. This will go on the same line. Then we're going to print a new line character. So it brings us down to the next line. Print the next row, new line character, next row, new line character, next row, etc. Right? So let's have a look at this now. Okay, let's go here. Let's run. How much would you like to deposit? $100. Let's bet on 2 lines. How much would you like to bet? $10. And there we go. Now we have our slot machine. Excuse me. And this is correct, right? So we have all of our columns and then all of our rows. And what we'd now be checking is if we have 3 in a row, right? That's what we're going to have to check. Okay, so we have our slot machine. We've spun it. We probably should have some input that asks, like, do you want to spin the slot machine? And then they can hit spin, blah, 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 be a bit more interactive. But that's how it works. And just to be clear here, we're going to check if we have 3 in a row. And if we do, based on the value of the symbol, we're going to multiply their bet and then give them that amount. All right, so let's write a function that can do this. Now, when we're checking if they won or not, we need to know what their bet is, which lines they bet on, right? And then we can actually check. Now, the way the lines works, again, I know this is not exactly how like a real casino slot machine would work. But we're going to make it so that if you bet on 1 line, you just bet on the top line. If you bet on 2 lines, you bet on the top and the middle. If you bet on 3 lines, you bet on all 3. I'm not going to let the user pick like where the 1 line is they want to bet on. We'll just say 1 is top, 2 is both the top 2, 3 is all of them. And that's how it'll work. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go define check winnings. Okay, now to do this, we need the slot machine itself. We need the lines. So we're going to say lines, and we need the bet. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, we just need to look at the rows that the user bet on. So let's start with that, and then we can check each row and determine a value also for the symbol. So we're actually going to take one more thing. We're going to say values. Now I'm also going to make the values here. So I'm going to say symbol underscore value. And I don't know what actually makes sense again to do for this, but we're going to say that D is going to be a 2 times multiplier. C is going to be a 3 times multiplier. This will be 4, and then this will be 5. So, you know, the more rare the symbol is, the higher your bet gets multiplied. Again, I don't think this is a fair slot machine, but that's fine. Okay, so check winnings. Now we have columns, lines, bet, and value. Now let's look through only the rows that they bet on. So the lines that they bet on. So to do this, we're going to say for, and we'll say line in range. Then this is going to be lines like this. Now, the reason this will work is because if they bet on one line, then we're going to go up to one line but not include it. So that means line will be equal to 0, right? So if they bet one line, then this is 1, and that means this is only ever going to be 0. If they bet on 2 lines, then line will go to 0 and 1. So we'll check the 0th row, which is line 1, and the first row, which is line 2. If they bet on all 3 lines, then line will be 0, then 1, then 2. So we'll check all 3 of those rows, right? And this will work dynamically even if there was more lines to bet on. So inside this for loop, we need to check that every single symbol in the line or row that we're checking is the same. So we can get the first symbol that's in this row and then just make sure it's the same for the rest of the symbols. So to do that, we're going to say symbol is equal to columns 0 at the current line. Now, the reason we're using columns 0 is because we have all of the columns, not all of the rows. It makes it a bit more complicated. So we need to look at the first column because that's where the first symbol is always going to be for each row, and then get whatever line we're on. So first column, and then either line 0, line 1, line 2, etc. going down that first column gives us the first symbol, and we're going to assume that we always have at least one real, right? So at least one column. So now that we have the symbol, we're going to loop through all of our columns. So we're going to say for column in columns like that. Now, what we want to check, so the symbol to underscore check is equal to the column at whatever row we're looking at. So if we're looking at row 0, we're checking the first symbol in the column. If we're looking at row 1, checking the second symbol in the column, etc. Symbol to check. We're then going to say if the symbol is equal to the symbol to check, and actually we'll say if it is not equal to the symbol to check, then we are going to break. Okay. Now the reason we're breaking is because if we found one of the symbols is not equal to the previous symbol, or equal to all of the symbols that should be in this row, then we just break out of the for loop. And what we'll do is we'll put an else statement here. And what this else statement will do is it will tell us if we didn't break out of the for loop. So I'm sure you probably haven't seen this before, but you can do a for else where if you break, this else statement does not run, but if no break occurs within the for loop, then this else statement executes. So in the else statement here, what we'll do is we'll figure out how much they won. So we'll say winnings is equal to 0. Okay. And then here, we're going to say winnings plus equals, and then this is going to be the values at the symbol multiplied by the bet. And then we can go here and return the winnings. Okay, so let's look at this because I'm sure this is confusing. We have every line in the lines, which means we're looping through every row, essentially, that we're going to be checking that the user bet on. We then say the symbol that we want to check is whatever symbol is in the first column of the current row, because all of the symbols need to be the same, right? We then say for column in column. So we now know the symbol that we're going to check. Now we need to loop through every single column and check for that symbol. So we go to each column and we say the symbol to check is equal to the column at the current row that we are looking at. So if it's row 0, we're doing row 0. If it's row 1, etc. We then check if these symbols are not the same. If they are not the same, we break out, which means that we're going to go check the next line because they didn't win, because symbols were not the same. If they are the same, then we don't break. And if we get to the end of this for loop and we've not broke out, which means all of the symbols were the same, then that means that the user won. And what they won is whatever the multiplier is for that symbol times their bet, right? And this bet is the bet on each line, not the total bet, right? So they could win on one line, but lose on the other line. That's how it works. Okay, hopefully that's clear. I can't explain it much more than that. Just understand symbol values here, right? Gives us, 5, 4, 3, 2. So that's what I'm using. I'm saying values at whatever the symbol is multiplied by the bet. And that's how we're adding to the winnings. Okay, so that's it for determining how much they won. So let's run the game one full time now. And then we'll figure out how we can run it multiple times and reduce the balance and all of that, which is easier than what we just did. Okay, so we print the slot machine. And now we're going to say winnings is equal to, and what did I call this? Check winnings. Okay. Check winnings. We need to pass to this our slots, the number of lines. So I think we called that lines, right? The bet, which we have right here, and the values, which is called symbol value. So let's go symbol underscore value. All right, then we're going to print U1, and then whatever the amount is that they won. So let's make this an F string. Okay, and then U1, and then this is going to be winnings like this. And this could potentially be $0, right? Okay, so I think that's good. I'm thinking that we might want to also tell them how many lines they won on or what lines they won on. So let's actually return that as well from this function. So get check winnings. We're going to do one more thing here. We're going to say winning underscore lines is equal to an empty list. And if they win, we're going to say winning lines plus equals, actually not plus equals, dot append. And then this is going to be whatever the current line number is, but we're going to have to add 1 to it because this is an index and we want like line 1, 2, 3, not 0, 1, 2. So we say winning lines dot append line plus 1. Then we go here and we put winning lines, and now we're returning 2 values, the total amount they won, as well as what lines they won on. Okay, now let's go here to winning lines, and we're going to say winnings and winning underscore lines. You won these winnings, and then we'll say U1, we'll print another line like this, F U1 on, and then this is going to seem a little bit weird, but I'm going to do asterisks, and then I'm going to pass my winning lines. Now, again, I promised I was going to show you guys some new stuff, so I'm showing you some advanced syntax here, but what this does is it's actually called the splat operator or the unpack operator, and it's going to pass every single line from this winning lines list to this print function. So what that means is if we have lines like 1 and 2, it's going to pass both 1 and 2. So it's going to say U1 on and then 1, 2. So I'm going to say U1 on lines like this, and then it would say 1 space 2. If we want on all 3 lines, say 1 space 2 space 3. If we didn't want any lines, then it's not going to say anything. Okay, you'll see when we print this out how this works. So let's run this here. Let's make this full screen now, and let's go through an example. So deposit $100. How many lines? 4. Invalid. Okay, let's bet on 2 lines. How much would you like to bet on each line? $10. All right, so we won $0 because none of the symbols are the same. So let's try again. All right, deposit $100. 2 lines, sorry. How much would you like to bet? $10. You won $0. Okay, so this is going to happen a few times. So rather than continuing to do this and hoping that we're going to win, let's make it so that we can run this multiple times without having to constantly rerun the program. So we have this main function. We have the balance and we have the lines. Now, the balance is going to stay the same, but all of this stuff here needs to happen multiple times, right? And we'll reduce from the balance and all of that stuff. So let's copy all of this into a function. And let's say define, let's say game, okay? We'll put this inside of here. So this kind of executes one game. Now, what we can do is write a while loop here. And this while loop can kind of handle running the game. All right, so I'm just thinking here, if we do this, we need some way to determine like from this instance of the game, so like per spin. So actually, let's just say this is maybe spin. We need to know how much they won or they lost. So I'm just going to return here the winnings minus the total bet, and that will tell us how much they won or lost from this spin. Because if they won $100 but they bet 15, then they only won 85. So then here we would update and we would add 85. Right? But if they didn't win anything, then it's going to be negative whatever the total bet is, so like $15, so we'd subtract 15 from the balance. Okay, so here I'm going to say while true, and we'll print current balance is, and then we can just put comma. Actually, let's do this as an F string so we can put a $sign. Current balance is, and then we'll do $, and then balance, okay? And then we'll play game. So we'll say spin equals input, say press enter to spin. Okay, so they'll press enter to spin. So actually we don't even need to put a value here because we don't care what they type in. Or actually we can say this, spin is equal to press enter to spin, and we'll say Q to quit. So if they type in Q, then we'll quit. So we can say if spin is equal to Q, then we will break the while loop, which will just end the game. Okay, otherwise we'll spin. So we can say spin like that, and we'll say balance plus equals spin. So the way that this works now is that spin is going to return to us however much they won or lost. It will tell them like what they won or lost. So then we'll just update the balance based on the result of that spin. And then we'll run this again and say, okay, current balance is this, press enter to spin, blah, blah, blah. And then when they spin, they're going to have to enter this info. And actually, press enter to spin probably doesn't make sense to go here, right? Because you only want to spin after you enter your information. Although we can just have, this works. We'll say press enter to play. That's fine. And then they can do it inside of there. Okay. Now that we have that, I think that's actually all that we need. I'll just make one last print statement here that says you left with, and then we'll put it inside dollars, and then this will be the balance, and we'll put an F string here. All right, let's run this and give it a shot. Okay, so run, go here. How much do you like to deposit? Let's deposit $1,000. Okay, current balance is $1,000. Press enter to play, Q to quit. Okay, enter. And we got an object here, balance plus equals spin. All right, looks like we need to fix this. So balance is equal to deposit, balance plus equals spin. We have winning lines subtracted by total bet. And what is the problem? All right, so the issue here is that I accidentally have the name of my function, spin, the same name as this right here. So we're just gonna change this to be answer. So now this will work properly. Okay, so my apologies, guys. Let's go here and fix this. And let's say $1,000. Current balance is 1,000. Press enter play. Okay. Enter the number of lines to bet on. Let's bet on 2 lines. Let's bet $10. Okay. Balance is not defined. Looks like we need to fix another error. So what we need to pass here is balance to the spin function so that it can actually check this when we make a bet. So of course that makes sense. Just forgot to do that. So let's pass balance here. And now it will actually be able to check that. All right, so let's try it again. Third time's a charm. $100. Current balance is $100. Press enter to play. Okay, number of lines. Let's go 3. Let's go $10. And you are betting on $10. You're betting $10 on 3 lines. Total bet is equal to $30. Okay, you won $0. You won on lines. And it has an issue here, unsupported operands for list and int. Okay, my apologies. That's because I put winning lines. This needs to be winnings. All right, 4th time's a charm. So let's make sure our variable names are correct. That was just a silly mistake. Let's clear and run. $100. Enter. 3 lines, $10. Okay, you won $0. You won on lines. Your current balance is $70. Okay, let's play again. 3 lines, $5. Okay, did we win anything? No, we did not. All right, let's play again. I'd really like to try to win something, but as we can see, the slot machine is not in our favor today. $10. You won $0. Okay. Current balance is $25. All right. 3 lines, $2. You won $4. Okay. Nice. So how did we end up winning $4? We bet $2 and we got a line here of D's. So that gave us times 2 multiplier. So 2 times 2, 4. So we won $4. There you go. And then our balance gets updated, to $23 because we were at 25, subtracted 6, add 4. Yes. Okay. So that makes sense. All right, so let's play again. Let's go 3 lines, $1. Okay, you won nothing. Let's play again. 3 lines, $1. You won nothing. 3 lines, $1. Oops. Let's go $3. You won nothing. Okay, play again. 1 line, $3. You won nothing. All right, well, I won't continue to play, but you get the point. We've just created a slot machine, and now if I hit Q and enter, we leave with $11. All right, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm going to zoom out a bit so you guys can read more of this code. I'll just kind of scroll through it. I'll also put it in the description in case you want to reference it on GitHub. But you can see this is what we wrote. So we did about 150 lines of code in, I guess, about an hour. Now I walked you through my thought process. I showed you a bunch of different Python features. We did actually some fairly advanced logic in terms of looking through rows and columns and looking at nested lists. I showed you about functions. I showed you about the anonymous variable. You saw this splat operator here. And when we won on a line, you saw it said we won on whatever the line number was. So hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Hopefully this showed you kind of how to structure a program. Notice that we put everything in separate functions. We've kind of spread our code out. We've made it very readable. And now we know if there's a bug anywhere, it's really easy for us to go and kind of figure out where that is because we've separated everything into different units, right? Different blocks of code. Anyways, I will wrap it up here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this style of teaching, then make sure you check out programmingexpert.io. And I look forward to seeing you in another YouTube video.